speaker. We're running ahead. Lunch is ready, but don't go yet. Lunch is ready, but we'd like Tom Pendegrass to come up. Tom Pendegrass married me. He's a great man of God, in my opinion. I love him. And I lost track about 25 years or something with him, maybe more. And I went to dinner one night with Debbie, and they walked in, and I go, hi. And she goes, I think that's Ray and Debbie over there. That's how long it's been. And so anyways, they came over, and I said, well, tell me your story, Tom. And he started telling me his story. And I said, man, God's used you mightily. You got to come to this breakfast I do and give your testimony. Oh, really? So I'd like him to come up, give his testimony. Tom, I love you. Come on up. Appreciate you. Thanks for marrying us.
It's tough, isn't it? How many years is it?
36.
36 years?
We've never fought. She's fought with me. I've never fought with her. And that's my side of the story.
Happy wife, happy life.
There's probably some stories there, guys. And I'll stay out of those things. But it's a special treat for me. And I can look back on years of ministry invested in people's lives and to see how God has been so gracious and so good to just solidify and confirm His Word, but just to say in His own way to us, I'm greater than you. And He's bigger than us, guys. And when you understand how big God is and what He can do with your life, it's just amazing to see it, how God can take and transform people's lives and turn them into things that you could never be. I'm teaching in our church right now in breaking the first miracle down for the class, and there's 10 foundational principles in that story that I think everyone should know. But I was dealing with last week the power of empty vessels and the power of transition. Those 2 principles. And as we were talking about it, I was sharing with the concept of empty vessels with the class and saying to them, you know, God can fill the emptiness of life. You can understand that all He needs really from us is an availability of ourselves.
Amen.
So when God finds those person who is empty, it's amazing how He can use emptiness to a powerful expression of who He is. So when after the class said to me, well, I understand empty, Pastor, but what about it? He said, I'm filled with some stuff that I know God is dealing with. And I said to that person afterwards, well then, isn't it amazing that God can take the stuff that's inside and make it something different? But He can actually take water and turn it into wine. He can take ugliness and make it into goodness.
Amen.
He can take that which is unhealthy and turn it into something that is healthy. He can take the thing that is in you that is not right and make it right.
Amen.
Come on. You understand what I'm trying to say to you? And if you can't see that aspect of God's power in transition, you're going to miss it in life. You're going to miss something great and powerful that will cause you to be able to impact the world. And so this morning, where are we at? Morning still? I guess I'm on, Ray said, would you come and give your testimony? So I'm going to try to give to you a testimony of what God did in our lives in a transitional time. Before we get started, though, I think you should stand with me. Come on. Come on a little bit. What I want you to do is what the David said, Lord, I stretch forth my hand. Come on, stretch them out, guys. Preach to the Lord and say with me, God is good.
God is good.
Say, God is great.
God is great.
God is my sufficiency.
God is my sufficiency.
Thank you, Lord. Father, this morning, in the name of Jesus Christ, somehow inspire us to find you and to see you through the things that we need to share and talk about for these few moments. I pray in Jesus' name that the Holy Spirit will illuminate our minds and our hearts
Yes.
Transform us this morning into that image and that purpose that you have for us. Speak to us, I pray, for the sake of your kingdom. In Jesus' name, everyone says,
Amen.
Amen.
Slap someone with a high five and say, go God. Come on. All right. You be seated. God bless. I was in a Myers store in Indiana before I retired from FedEx. You'll get to that part of the story before it's over. But I was in a Myers store in Gola, Indiana, and I was wearing a jacket that my wife bought for me, a leather jacket, which is a Buckeye jacket. She went to the Buckeye store in Toledo, and for my Christmas present, she bought me this leather Buckeye jacket. I'm a big Buckeye fan. Is everyone here a Buckeye fan? If you're a Michigan fan, and we need to have a prayer meeting. And so I was in the store and we did some dealing, working, and came out of the store. And as I was coming out of the store, I heard this guy yell, "OH!"
I-O.
And I turned and I said, "I-O!" And I'm trying to figure out who this guy was. And again, I heard this "OH!" And I turned again to find the boys, and there was I-O again came roaring back. All right. So he came up to me. We got to talking. And there was another man with them, and as we were talking about it, he says, "Oh, you're a Buckeye fan?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I love my Buckeyes." And and then the man that was standing next to him said to me, he said, "Tom, if you weren't a Buckeye fan, what would you be?" And I looked at him and I said, "I'd be ashamed of myself." If I wasn't a Christian, what would I be? Knowing the goodness of God this morning. I'll tell you what I would be. I'd be ashamed of myself. Because there's really no other way to live. There's really no other better alternative in life. People who submit to me, well, Christianity's all right for you, but I say, well, what's your alternative? Tell me what you have better to offer. Tell me what will sustain you any better than what I'm trying to tell you about and who I know. I just don't think you can find me. And so I've committed in all these years of 50 plus years of knowing God that there's no other way to live except committed to the Lord Jesus Christ. Come on, man. Do you agree with me?
Amen.
Okay. There's something about change. I saw it up here. It says up here in the right-hand corner of this banner, you can change. Do you believe that?
Yes. Amen.
I do believe that. The story of life and going through the changes of life, sometimes that's a maneuvering process that sometimes we can have a difficult time with. There's some changes that I've gone through in life that I don't quite understand. I didn't understand at the moment. I understand a little bit better now, but I didn't understand them at the time. But I often ask people who are dealing with life and are going through difficult situations and their life is a mess, and oftentimes I've asked them this question: how bad does life have to get before you're willing to change? Just how bad does life have to get before you're willing to change? I've asked that question to people before, and sometimes until people realize how bad life is and they hit the wall where they realize something has got to change, there really is no significant change. I've come to realize, though, in all these years, that change is part of life. Change is just the thing that we have to realize and anticipate and realize that there will be changes in our life. Maneuvering, though, through those changes of life is the trick. I was reading a story again of Elijah. I'm setting up my testimony just for a moment, if you will. I was reading the story of Elijah and how he had gone to Ahab and trying to convince him of his deeds in his life, and finally he said, "It's not going to rain until I say it's going to rain." And then God sent him And then God sent him. Remember the story? God sent him to the brook, Cherith. And there by the brook Cherith, there was this story of how God fed him with the ravens. And he drank from the brook. Remember the story, guys?
Yes.
And he's by the brook there. God has hid him away. And he's drinking from the brook and being fed by the ravens. And finally God, the scripture says the brook dried up. The brook dried up. And when the brook dried up and the ravens stopped bringing the bread, then God said to Elijah, he says, you need to get over to Zarephath because there's a widow over there who I have prepared for you who is going to take care of your needs. Change is not bad. Change can be the thing that we need to get us to where we need to be. Because sometimes those people who do not change can stay in the place where the situation has dried up and there's no more food. You could starve to death if you don't change.
Amen.
That's right.
Change was not the thing that God had to say to Elijah is that which once fed you, that which was feeding your spirit, that was what's feeding your life, is now going to change. And for you to sustain life, you're going to have to get to this person that I've arranged who will speak into your life and give to you the thing that you need to sustain life and move forward. I'm submitting to you this morning, men, that in every one of our lives there are God-sent people. There are God-arranged people. I submit to you, when you read that story and read it closely, you will not find any place where the widow understood she was going to be used of God. She was preparing herself to die, not even realizing that God was arranging the situation, that she was going to be the instrument for a great change in a man's life to sustain him to the next step. Do you see what I'm saying?
Amen.
She didn't know what was happening. She was dealing with life as she knew it. And yet God was setting up the situation so life could be represented in a different way through a man called Elijah. Change is important. You can starve to death if you're not willing to change. The thing that once fed you, when it stops feeding me, simply means you better find out where the food is at. And you better find that place that really will connect with your heart and with your spirit and will minister to you. That's why I love the scripture in John. In John, where it says, and there was a man named John who was sent from God. There was a man named who? John, who was sent from God. It's a wonderful verse. It's a change. Well, my change came this way. I'm going to finish up, right? We've got to be out here in 15 minutes, right?
20 minutes.
20 minutes, okay.
19 minutes.
Still counting. Still going down. Hurry, Tom. Hurry. All right.
18 minutes.
18 minutes.
Let's
Go home, guys. Oh, my head. First nearly 30 years of my life, I was involved in pastoring churches, preaching, teaching, planning churches, overseeing churches. My wife and I, for almost the first 30 years of our life, that's all we knew. And there came a place where I needed a change. And I wasn't sure what that change was, but I knew that God was speaking to my life, and so I asked the church for a sabbatical leave, for a time away from the ministry, a break, because I felt like there was some kind of adjustment that God wanted to do. And so as we took that sabbatical break and took that time away, the financial support, how can I say it? The financial support of the church that was supporting us at that time ran out. And at that time, I still had 3 teenage kids at home. And I realized I needed to go to work because the funds from the church had dried up. The brook had dried up. Hello? The brook had dried up. And so I realized I needed to go to work. And so I found myself working in the carpentry business. I found myself first working as a rough carpenter, and then I went into finished carpentry. And for basically 5 years, I did rough and finished carpentry work in the Akron, Canton area. And it was a time in which, God sustained us. It wasn't a real prosperous time. It met the bills. You know what I'm talking about? But it was such a change from almost 30 years of being involved in ministry. I can't tell you what a significant change it was. But it was a significant change. But I did that for 5 years. And then at the end of those 5 years, I realized that it was getting tougher to climb up on top of those roofs and move around. I mean, rough carpentry work was a young man's game, and I realized that this is not working real well. And the economy was slowing down, and I knew that I needed to find another job, and I wasn't quite sure what I should do. And finally, someone told me, I don't know who that person is. I should track them down sometime. But someone said, have you ever considered driving a truck? And I had to admit, every time I opened up the paper to see what the new job opportunities were, there seemed to be a lot of job opportunities for truck driving. And so I said, well, that's something to consider. But then I remember the words of my wife, who said to me when we were first married, honey, he says, I don't care what you do in life, where you work, I really don't care, as long as you don't drive a truck. Her dad was a truck driver, and she remembers the life of that experience in her own home, and so she wasn't so keen about that. But in spite of what she said, she said, you go ahead and do whatever you feel God is saying. And so I went back to truck driving school in Akron, Ohio, and I got my CDL, and I came out of that. I came out of that experience with my CDL. Well, when you come out of a truck driving school, if anyone knows this, how that works, I'll tell you how it works. If you come out of truck driving school and you've never driven a truck, and you go out to try to find someone who will hire you, most reputable companies want at least 1 year of over-the-road experience. Well, I came out of truck driving school and I didn't have 1 year of over-the-road experience. And the only companies that really hire people out of truck driving schools usually are those companies that are wanting to pay very minimum wage and just use you to the fullest extent, and they're really not the best companies to link up with. Well, I was in that situation, but I had the kids at home, I needed money coming in, and so I went on to say, okay, this is what seems to be what God has for me, so I will venture down that road. Well, let me get my notes in line. And so I interviewed a couple companies. One that was close was in Youngstown, Ohio. It was a company called Falcon Transport. Anyone ever heard about Falcon Transport? If you've seen them in the news about a month ago, they went bankrupt. But 1,200 drivers, I think, for that company lost their job. But it was Falcon Transport in Youngstown, Ohio, that finally said, yeah, we'll take you on, Tom. And so I went with them, and they convinced me first to start with the flatbed division. Flatbed divisions basically are trucks that haul steel, and I basically hauled steel all the way from the Mississippi River up to the East Coast, up and down, north and south. And I hauled all manners of steel with flatbed for 6 months. And in that 6 months, which was a difficult time, I'd always come home after being on the road all week, and I'd come home with a check and the expenses of the road, and basically I had nothing. We had basically nothing to live on. The checks were just so small that we could not continue. So finally, my last run with the flatbed was to Wheeling, West Virginia. I remember after I let that load off, I called the company, and I called them and I said I quit. I'm bringing your truck back to you. And when I did that, the vice president said, oh, Tom, we like your work ethic so much. We don't want you to quit. How about trying our van division? Well, van division means the 48 and 53-foot box trailers. You see what I'm saying? They went down the road and they said, well, how about trying that? We think we have more money there. So, there one is, yeah. And so I started driving one of these trucks up and down the East Coast all the way to Mississippi River and over. Again, it was, I'd come home, when I'd come home with the check, and my wife would check on the check. There was hardly any money in there, and anyone who's been through that situation knows how frustrating that is. And it all came to a crisis point when I received a load that was supposed to go to Sparrows Point, Maryland. If you look on the map and find Sparrows Point, you'll find it's across the harbor from Maryland, right on the Atlantic coast, right there on the tip. Sparrows Point, Maryland was the place that I was supposed to go. And so when I saw where the load was going, the night before I looked at the map, calculated the miles, calculated my money needs, and knew I had to drive through the night. So I drove all through the night, across the turnpike, across the New Jersey turnpike, crossed over into Maryland, and got to Sparrows Point as the sun, as the daybreak was just starting to happen. I got to the plant, and I pulled into the plant, and after I got unloaded with that load, after I backed that big trailer in back to the dock and they unloaded me, I said to the dock foreman, is it possible that I could just sleep here in the back part of your yard? I said, I've been driving all night, I'm out of hours, I need a place to park this truck. You understand, man, you just don't find, you can't park a truck like that just any place. And so the man who, the dock foreman said to me, no, Tom, you're going to have to get that truck off our lot. We have other trucks coming in and there's no room for you. You got to get off the lot. So I got back in the truck and went back out the same gate I came in, down the road, looking for a place to park a 53-foot box truck. And down that road was businesses, and there was no open space, and I went just a short distance, probably maybe a mile, and when I noticed up ahead of me, I thought I saw a truck over to the right-hand side. And when I got closer, I realized that truck, beside that truck was just enough room for me to pull this truck, my truck, in alongside that truck. And so I pulled in alongside, I maneuvered it, wedged that truck into that, next to the other truck, side by side, pulled the truck to a stop, turned off the key, and the first thing I did is I reached into my wallet. I'll never forget, I reached into my wallet. I opened up my wallet to see what I was anticipating was a problem. When I opened up my wallet, there was not a single bill in that wallet, guys. I was in Sparrows Point, Maryland, and I had exhausted all my money on tolls, unanticipated tolls to get to that place. If you've ever traveled the East Coast and gone over through the road system, you'll realize there's so many tolls that you got to deal with. And when I realized I had exhausted my money, I reached into my pocket to see what might be there, and I reached in and I found some change. And I began to count the change, and as I counted the change, I realized that all I had was enough for a cup of coffee. And I took that change and stuck it back in my pocket. And suddenly it hit me. I was broke. I was a man that was making no money. The brook had dried up. And I didn't know what to do. And I found myself clutching that steering wheel. And I began sobbing like a baby. I sobbed and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. And in between the sobs, all I could hear myself saying to God was, God, I don't know what to do. God, I don't know what to do. You'll excuse me if this thing, every time I tell this story, it's just amazing to me. Still gets to me. I said, God, I don't know what to do. And when I finally cried as much as I could cry, and I couldn't cry anymore. I thought, I got to get out of this truck. This truck is prison for me. I got to get out of this cabin. I got out of the cabin. I walked down the length of my truck and down around the back. I came up the other side, on the passenger side, in between the other truck. And when I got to the cab of the other truck, the cab door of that truck swung open. And out stepped this man with a big smile on his face. He was about 6'4", big man, not heavy, just big, you know. And he looked like he just got out of the shower. And then I noticed the cab of his truck. He had one of those really fancy truck cabs, you know, that have showers and they have little ovens and they have it all. It's like a home on wheels. And he had one of those kind of sharp vehicles. And he stepped out and it looked like he just got out of the shower. He was smiling and he sat down to the ground and he said, "Good morning." He said, "Oh yeah, good morning." I said, "Where are you at, man? You're not in my shoes. You don't know what's going on." He said, "Good morning." He says, "My name is Floyd McDonald, and I'm from Tacoma, Washington, the state of Washington. I'm from Tacoma, Washington." He said, "What's your name?" And I said, "Well, my name's Tom Pendegrass. I'm from Canton, Ohio." He said, "Great, Tom. Great to meet you." He says, "I'm going across the street to that little restaurant." He pointed to it. And he said, "I'm going across the street to that little restaurant to have some breakfast. Why don't you join me?" And I said to him, I fib. That's also called a lie, for the sake of you. But I fibbed. I said, "Well, I'm really not that hungry, but I'm willing to go have a cup of coffee with you." He said, "Great." So he said, "Let's go." And across the street we went. So when we went into that little restaurant, the waitress came up with the coffee, and I gotta hurry. Came up with the coffee and served us and 2 menus. And so Floyd, he's looking at the menu, and I looked at the menu just to pretend, you know. But when the waitress came back, Floyd said to the waitress, "Ma'am, I'm having steak and eggs with the works." And then he pointed at me and said, "And he's having steak and eggs with the works too. And I'm paying." Just like that. Say with me. And there was a man sent from God, whose name was John. Now let's change it. And there was a man sent from God, whose name was Floyd McDonald. If you don't recognize those God-sent people, you'll miss it, dear ones. I shouldn't say dear ones, guys. It sounds like I'm talking to ladies. Come on. You got to give me some space here. So anyway, they came back and we ate that breakfast. I'm going to have to tell you, I choked down that breakfast. That was the hardest breakfast I think I ever ate in my life, because I was so emotionally distraught with that situation. I could hardly eat without crying. And I was trying to be a man and not let him know what was going on, and yet I had to wolf down that steak breakfast, poor me, right? Yeah. And I had to wolf that thing down and hold it together, and finally finished it. And I'll never forget Floyd when he finished it, he pushed his plate aside and he looked in my eyes and he said to me, "Tom, tell me your story." Come on. Every one of you in this room this morning have a story to tell. Every one of you has some way to talk to me about where you are and how you got here. You're not here by accident. You're here because you have a story. You have a life. Something has happened that has brought you to this moment, to this occasion. I don't know why I came here. My wife says, "Where are we going?" I said, "I don't know, in the woods, right?" I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know if I fit. All I can do is tell you the story. And he told me, "Tell me your story, Tom." And so I told him. I told him about leaving the ministry after 30 years. I told him what was doing for 6 months with a flatbed and I was making no money. I told him that I was on this run here, and I just realized that I wasn't making any money on this one either. The one thing I did not tell him is I didn't tell him I was out of money. I didn't tell him that. I didn't tell him that I had just pennies, just about a buck and a change or more, enough to buy a cup of coffee. I didn't tell him that. So I told him the story, and when he finished, he didn't interrupt me. I'll never forget. He sat there and listened to me. And in between, he saw I was fighting back tears, and finally, when I finished my story, he looked at me. He looked at me, and he said to me, he says, Tom, for over 40 years I've driven a truck. Over 40 years I've been in the trucking industry. I own my own company. And he said, if you're willing, and these were the words, this is amazing to me. He says, Tom, if you're willing to make a covenant with me right now, that you'll never make another trucking decision without first contacting me, I will tell you how to make money driving a truck. He used the word covenant. This is a man from Tacoma, Washington, I've never met in my lifetime. He used the word covenant. No one uses the word covenant unless they're, right?
Amen.
No one uses the word covenant unless they are connected somehow to the concept of Christianity.
That's right.
But that's the words he used. He said, if you're willing to make a covenant with me, to never make a trucking decision again in your life without first contacting me, I'll tell you how to make money driving a truck. It was a God moment when God linked together two people who had never been linked together, had God not arranged it. And there was a man, sent from God, whose name was Floyd McDonald. You're going to have to put your own name in there, guys. But if you really begin to investigate your life and look at it, the people who really, the big changes in your life, you'll find someone whose name is in that line. It won't be Floyd McDonald, but it'll be someone. I guarantee you it'll be someone. And I committed myself to that man. He stuck out his hand after he asked that question. He said, Tom, if you're willing to commit yourself and covenant with me that you'll never make another trucking decision, I'll tell you how to make money driving a truck. And he stuck out his hand and he said, what do you say? And across that table in a little restaurant, I don't know if I can find it today in Sparrows Point, I shook hands with a man from Tacoma, Washington, who I'd never met before, and I covenanted with him that I would never make another trucking decision. Thank you, 5 minutes until I first contacted him. Then he took out a piece of paper and began to write. And as he wrote, he began to list out what I should do. And he said, Tom, this is the information you're going to need for the next stage in your life. Take this information and use it. And on that piece of paper was his name, his address, phone numbers, all the things that I would need for people to reference him. And they were the things also that I needed to do when I got back to Ohio. First thing on that list, I remember that list, I carried it for years. The first thing on that list that he had on it, number one, was go tell them that you're quitting. That was easy to do. So we walked out of the restaurant, walked back across the street after I agreed to all these conditions, walked back across the street, and standing in front of our trucks together, and standing there together, two men. He reminded me of the covenant we had just made, and then he said, oh, just a minute. And he got back up in his truck. He said, wait a minute, I'll be right back. He got back up in his truck, and after a minute he came back, and then he said, he stuck out his hand to me before he left, and when he stuck out his hand to shake my hand, he pressed into my hand a wad of money. He pressed in my hand a wad of money, and looked me in the eyes, and he says, Tom, this is not a loan. This is a gift. Use it any way you want. And I couldn't believe it. All I could say is thank you. But then he said, remember our covenant. And I stuck the wad of money into my pocket, and he drove off, and he went back to Tacoma, Washington. there's so many more details. 5 minutes, oh, I'm in trouble. Anyway, he drove back to Tacoma. So I got back to Ohio, finished the story up a little bit. I went back to Ohio, called Falcon, told them that I was quitting. It was the first thing on the list. They pleaded with me not to quit. They said to me, Tom, we just got a contract from GM, and it will be our highest paying run that we have in our company. You will make good money. It's pulling 48-foot doubles. 48-foot doubles. Two of these things from Twinsburg, Ohio to Toledo, Ohio, and back two turns each night. And they said, if we can get you qualified to pull qualified and certified to pull long doubles on the Ohio Turnpike, would you consider staying? I told him, I said, well, I'll have to get back to you. I've got to talk to my consultant. Yeah, man. I know, dummy. I know. I said, I got to talk to my consultant. And they said, okay. And so I called Floyd and I told him the proposition that they had given to me. And I said to him, what do you think, Floyd? He said, let me do some research on it. I'll get back to you. He got back to me, and when he got back to me, he said, I think it's a good thing for you to do, Tom. Go for it. So I went back into the office, told the people, okay, if you can get me certified by the state of Ohio to pull two of those things, I said, I'll stay with you. I won't quit. And so about a week later, at that time they said to me, we need some information on people who can recommend you. I said, I got just the person. And I gave him the name of Floyd McDonald with all the details, phone numbers, all the pertinent information. I gave it to my one of the main men in Falcon, and they said, well, we'll research it out. A week went by, and I walked in, and I heard this man with a chip voice say, hey, Tom, guess what? He says, we got you certified by the state of Ohio. That's amazing. He said, I just want you to know that man, Floyd McDonald, man, his information, he's the one that got you through.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
To this day, I don't know what Floyd McDonald said to that man. I don't have no idea what the conversation was like, but all I know, there was a man sent from God whose name was Floyd. I'm telling you, what a blessing. For 5 years, I pulled 48-foot doubles. And in that time, everything that we had lost, because in those 5 years, the prosperity of the ministry vanished away. We were struggling to the point we couldn't even make our rent payments. And yet it was the guy that farmer who was renting us that place. I went to him, I said, I'm an honest man, if you can bear with me, I will pay you every dime I owe you. And I did. When God turned that thing, I wish I could talk about the turning of the Lord, but when God turned that thing through Floyd McDonald, I began to make money. Floyd was right, he knew how to make money. And I began to make money like I never made before, and suddenly I was able to pay my bills and get ahead. And we enjoyed great prosperity for 5 years. And then I was in a dental office up in Akron, 2 minutes. I've never been in a church where there's a sign going up 2 minutes. Pastor, I don't know how you do it, man. Anyway, I was in this dental office and waiting to be called in. I picked up a Forbes magazine, and Forbes magazine had an article of the 10 fastest growing companies in the United States. In that list of 10 companies was a trucking company called American Freightways out of Arkansas. And I began to see some of these trucks because on CB I was talking to the guys going across the turnpike every night. We became friends. And I began to talk to them. And a lot of them were saying, Tom, you ought to come over to this company. It's really a great company. And but I was making good money, and for 5 years we were prospering. But as I read that article, I began to feel something inside me saying, you need to make a change. And so I ran it by my wife. I said, I know that things are going wrong, but I just feel like we might need to begin to pray about this change. And so with that, I called Floyd McDonald, my consultant, I said, Floyd, what do you think? And Floyd would get back to me, and he said, Tom, I think that's a good thing to consider. And after some weighing it back and forth, and after the advice of Floyd McDonald say that's a good decision, I did make the change. And 1 week after I made that change, Falcon lost that contract, and my job would have dried up.
Voice of God.
And there was a man sent from God.
Name.
His name was Floyd McDonald. I went to American Freightways, and it was a good move. I began to prosper. And 6 months after I was with American Freightways, I walked in one day, and one of the drivers were all looked down in the mouth, and they were sad. And they said, "Oh, this is a bad day." And I said, "What happened?" And he said, "Oh, our company was just bought out." I said, "Who bought out by who?" And he said, "Bought out by FedEx." Another driver who'd been there a long time said to me, "That's what I did right there." Another driver said to me, he said, "Don't worry, Tom, this is good." He said, "FedEx is going to be a good move." 6 months after that time with American Freightways, American FedEx Freight bought out American Freightways. So I pulled those for a year, took a transfer up to Toledo. And at Toledo, I went to the bottom of the board. Here, I'll finish up quick. Went to the bottom of the board. When I finally walked in one day, and one of the vice presidents of FedEx was there, and they called me into the office, and they said, "Tom, yeah, we have a proposition for you to make, a proposition for you to consider." Said, "We would like to start a triples operation in coming out of Toledo, going to Chicago, and we've gone down the board, 3 of those babies." Yes, yeah. And 106 feet long from the nose to the end. And they said, "We want to start a triples operation, and this is what it would be, and it would be an increase in pay, and would you consider it?" And I said, "Well, I'm at the bottom of the board." And he said, "Well, here's the problem." He said, "We've gone through the whole board." He said, "Of all our list of some 70 drivers, you and another driver are the only ones who have qualified years of experience with long doubles to be qualified to do that. And would you consider it?" And I said, "Well, sure I would." And immediately what happened was I was moved from the bottom of the board to the top of the board. There was a man sent from God whose name was Floyd McDonald. God sent people. I pulled those for 16 years almost. Well, 13 really. 13 pulling on triples. And God blessed us. I'm here today to tell you I am retired. Got a pension out of it. Got the ability to know life in a retirement form that I don't have to worry about where my food is coming from.
Thank you, Jesus.
I'm not rich, but I'm well taken care of by God.
Amen.
I'm trying to say to you this morning simply this in closing. God can change anything. He can fill anything. And He certainly can change anything. If you see change in the perspective of God's work in your life, you will embrace it. You'll be fed by the change, and you'll never hunger again. You'll never know want again that God can't meet. I'm not saying you won't face challenges. I'm just saying you'll understand what it is for God to meet you at that point of your need. He can change your life and your situation. And I thank God today for the change that happened in our life. I did not anticipate it. I did not anticipate a Floyd McDonald. But I also know this morning as I'm standing here that all of us have the same potential to be changed. Don't ever forget that God has appointed certain people to walk into your life at certain appointed times for the purpose of getting you to where you need to be.
Come on.
So you won't starve to death, but that you'll flourish in your faith. if you can believe that with me, you'll understand what my testimony is all about. But it's not just what he'll do for me. He'll do it for you too.
Amen.
Let me pray with you. Father, thank you that you can do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that works in us. To you be the glory, to you be the honor, to the one who does all things well and knows us more intimately than anyone else. Thank you, Lord, that you don't leave us broke, that you come in and you fill our lives completely. For each man that is here this morning, whatever changes in life that they may experience or are experiencing, help them, Father, not to lose faith as they go through. Give them the faith to hear the voice of the one to whom they need to hear and to respond to the person they need to respond to. Let them make wise decisions so that the change will be beneficial, I pray. Spirit of the living God, now breathe fresh life into every person for their future. In Jesus' name.